Hi, this is Scott Ware with Radiance Magazine, and I'm here with a very special guest. We have Darryl Anka, who channels Bashar. Welcome, Darryl.
Thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it.
You too. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Now, there's some good interviews out there of you on YouTube and such right now, and so I saw a few, and I wanted to cover hopefully different material so
Sure.
people can learn more about you and your origin story and some of those. I did want to say, though, from your website, Bashar, who you channel, is a multidimensional being, a friend from what we perceive as the future, who has spoken for the past 34 years through channel Darryl Anka. He has brought through a wave of new information that clearly explains in detail how the universe works and how each person creates the reality they experience for greater self-empowerment. Most of which is based on the laws of physics as opposed to a nice new age philosophy to examine our belief systems and how to change what we believe about ourselves and our world to dramatically change what we experience in our lives. Now, Bashar, and you're waiting for a question.
Little update. This is the 37th year now.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
Sure.
that. Bashar describes the planet right now as going through a major transformation, an evolutionary leap to the next level of consciousness. And his message simply acts as a reminder of what we already know but may have forgotten, which can help us experience this transition smoothly and joyfully by expanding our awareness of the unlimited possibilities that are truly available to us. Particularly our connection with our higher self as being key to consciously creating the kind of reality we desire. Does that sound like something Bashar would say?
It sounds exactly like something you would say.
Is that what Darryl Anka would say?
Well, at this point in my life, yes.
Okay. Are you guys pretty much in alignment with beliefs? Is there anything that he believes that you do not?
No, not in terms of the basic principles.
Mm-hmm.
After doing this for so long, I've come to understand what these principles are all about. I've had a chance to apply them in my life and get the effect from them.
Okay.
So I understand the physics of what he's saying at this point, and therefore, even though I may not always succeed, because I'm human, I was born here, so
Yep.
it takes time for me to apply some of these too, but I've gotten better at it over the years. But you get to a point where when you understand enough of it, it doesn't really make sense to do it any other way, because what he's talking about is a description of how reality works, and therefore doing it another way is kind of going against the grain. So when
You can't go back.
No, when you apply it and it works, it's like, why make any other choice?
Exactly. Okay. Now, Bashar's prolific works, which are available at bashar.org, all made possible by the conveyor of these beautiful and empowering messages of Bashar, Darryl Anka. As I mentioned, there's a lot of good interviews out there, but I'm curious because I've been hearing what I feel Bashar's message has been over the years, not knowing Bashar existed. I've heard them in other institutions from other people. Do you believe a lot of these progressive institutions or other thought leaders got a lot from some of your earlier talks?
I'm sure some of them have.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the principles are also ancient, and so people will tap into it in their own way from time to time without necessarily having heard it directly from Bashar. I can usually tell when what they're talking about sounds more like a direct quote.
Sure.
Then they probably either heard it directly from Bashar or they've heard somebody quote Bashar. Because like I said, he's been doing this for 37 years, so I know that information has gone around.
Sure.
But ultimately it doesn't really matter, because if they're all talking about the same basic principle, people are going to arrive at that understanding in their own way anyhow. And that's really what counts, is just to get the point of what the principle is talking about and apply it in your life as best as you possibly can.
Sure. Now, when Bashar made the connection with you and you started channeling Bashar, was there a worry that you might become a guru or a worship figure?
I know that is always something to think about, and Bashar and me both take care to make sure people do not do that.
Sure.
Because it's really not about the messenger, it's about the message. Also, I have my own life to live, and I want to follow my passion, as Bashar suggests everyone does.
Yes.
So, I do not want to be in a position where I'm put on a pedestal. It would not work for my life,
Sure.
just to be who I am. But again, Bashar is always very clear about the idea, and this is one of the reasons why the channeling is happening in the way it is, because they want to remain in the background. They want the information to be up front not who they are. They don't want followers in any way, shape, or form. They're suggesting that people can become active participants in their own life. They can be their own best guides. And one of the things he said quite often is he's doing this job to put himself out of a job. Because once everyone understands these principles, they don't need to go and talk to him. They can answer their own questions. So
Exactly.
he is the farthest thing from wanting to be a guru. And that's not something I would really have fun being in my life either.
You mentioned they, Bashar's a they.
Well, he's a he, but he's connected to a civilization.
Okay, because you mentioned at other times Bashar as a single figure is in a scout vessel hovering over either Sedona or Egypt.
Sedona at this point and for some time.
Okay, for some time.
Yeah.
Now, does he have family worried about him? Missing him?
No.
How does that all
The
work?
reason that sometimes, especially when he's coming through me, he'll use words like we, is because he's telepathically connected to all of his people.
Okay.
Or as many of them as he needs to be at any given moment. So sometimes the information will translate through my brain as a plural because it senses that there might be more than one person listening on a telepathic party line, so to speak. But he is an individual and he is a first contact specialist. So he makes connections to new civilizations, and this is one of the ways they do that, by disseminating information and looking and seeing what do the people in that culture do with that information. Are they going to accept it and apply it, absorb it into their culture, or is it not something that they want? So they use how people respond to the information as a barometer to decide whether or not those people actually want contact to continue, become more formalized, and actually eventually become physical contact.
Because I was just going to ask you, what else is he doing up there when he's not in contact with you? He's looking at the situation as far as how people are receiving the information.
He's doing a lot of that, but the thing of it is because of where they're at in their evolution, time for him is not what it is for us. He can be doing incredible amounts of interdimensional multitasking without us necessarily perceiving that he's moved or gone anywhere. But from his perspective, he might have had conversations with 13 different civilizations in the time that he's not doing anything with me.
I see.
Plus, again, time being a little more fluid for them, it's not always real time when he's having a conversation with us. He might have already had the conversation. He might have yet to have the conversation.
Right.
When he has the conversation, he can simply, for lack of a better term, send that conversation to the period in time that works for us.
Sure.
So we may be completely out of sync in terms of when it's happening for him as opposed to when it's happening for us, but it will synchronize in whatever moment is correct for us to receive that information.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
I've seen people at your shows react to the information that Bashar is giving them, and I've seen people online, and you have a big Bashar has a big following, and at times Bashar has said this information is actually very simple to create the life you want, and yet if it is simple, why are so few people doing it?
I think that we have a lot of things to unlearn. We're brought up thinking that reality is a certain thing, that we have to approach it in a certain way. We have certain belief systems that get in our way.
Right.
A lot of people don't necessarily have the kind of perspective of themselves that allows them to really operate as who they truly are. They're trying to live up to other people's expectations, both in family, in work, in society. So I think most of the work and most of the information Bashar is sharing is helping people get out of their own way so they can take advantage of how simple the principles actually are. But they have to kind of deconstruct who they think they are before they can actually experience who they really have been created to be.
Okay. People have had a lot of improvements in their life with their love relationships, with getting what they want out of life, manifesting through the advice Bashar gives them.
Yes.
And I can see why they keep coming back for more. It's
yeah, but because the thing of it is the one thing I really appreciate about the way he delivers information is he doesn't leave it on the realm of kind of an open-ended philosophy. He's saying, look, what I'm telling you is physics. This is how reality actually physically works. This is energy, it's vibration, it's resonance, it's frequency, it's harmonization, it's synchronization. And he's literally laying out the information literally like an instruction manual.
Truly.
So it's like if you just follow these instructions, it will work to your advantage. Just like an instruction manual you get to operate a machine.
Sure.
If you don't follow the instructions, the machine may operate, but you may injure yourself, or it may not work to your advantage. So he's basically saying, look, I'm just telling you what we're observing.
Right.
I'm not giving you an opinion, I'm not giving you a philosophy. At the point that they are at in their evolution, he can actually see the structure of existence. So he's literally describing, this is how it's built, this is how it works. If you just do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it will work to your advantage,
right.
because we are literally giving you an instruction manual for how we see what that structure looks like. So it is reduced to a very simple tool
yep.
that everyone can use and apply in their life and get a result from.
You've said we're in an age of transformation, Bashar has said.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, aside from the greater availability of information on the internet, isn't it true that energetically there's just more opportunity for our own personal expansion because maybe of some unseen hand moving things? Or
well, they are helping. Many different beings, I'm sure, are helping, but it's still up to us to take that step. So they're making it easier for us. They're giving us more options, more opportunities to do so, but they're also attempting to help us learn that we're the ones that have to take that action. But they're making it easier for us to understand how to do that. They can't do it for us. They can't be responsible for us.
How are they making it easier for us?
Well, with the information.
Okay.
In other words, if somebody hands you an instruction manual, that should make operating the machine easier.
Sure.
If you follow the instructions. So they're giving us that instruction manual, but they're also telling us, here's how you get out of your own way so that you can use the instruction manual more clearly and use the tools more easily, more effortlessly in your life.
Right.
But we still have to be the ones to say, okay, I'm going to do that.
Right. And we have to know that we're empowered to do that, and that's something you try to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when Bashar starts talking about how belief systems work, he's attempting to deconstruct that for us in a way that allows us to change those beliefs that are in our way, that are fear-based beliefs, negative beliefs.
Or even just to see them in the first place.
And to be able to even know that they're there.
Right.
Yes, because many of those fear-based beliefs are unconscious. And we don't understand why something's not working in our lives.
Right.
So again, he's providing tools to say, here's what's getting in your way. It's about your belief. This is how you find out what that belief is. This is how you let it go. And once you truly let it go, the rest of this should be easier, if you've truly let it go.
Right.
But he explains how belief systems work and how sometimes when you're dealing with negative beliefs, there may be multiple negative beliefs working in concert together to prevent you from really understanding what you're dealing with, because that's simply the nature of a negative belief. In a sense, he said beliefs perpetuate themselves. They have to, because physical reality isn't real. It's an illusion. It's a projection of consciousness. So belief systems have to make you believe that what they're telling you is real. For positive beliefs, that's not really a big deal.
Right.
We're fine listening to the positive beliefs.
We go with that.
We go with that. The negative beliefs, in a sense, have to work harder so that you won't let them go, because they are designed to perpetuate themselves so you can have a physical reality experience.
They're devious.
But they're designed to perpetuate themselves. It's not that they're malicious, it's not that it's intentional, it's not like they have a mind of their own. It's just how the machine is designed.
Do they have a consciousness?
They are part of your own consciousness. They're getting their consciousness from you. They're getting their fuel, their energy from you. Because if you buy into it, then you're making it seem solid. You're making it seem like a fact as opposed to a belief. And so you have to really understand how they work so you can kind of see through the smoke and mirrors. You can see through, in essence, the lie that they're telling you about yourself in order so that you won't let them go. Once you understand that's how beliefs work, then you can start seeing it for what it is, and you can start realizing, oh, okay, I'm afraid to let it go, but the fear I'm feeling about letting it go is a product of the negative belief. It's not a fact that something bad will happen.
Right.
It's just telling me something bad will happen if I let it go, so I won't let it go. So you have to kind of see the magic trick behind that and have the skeleton key to go, this is just a belief, it's not a fact, it's not any more real than anything else. And then you can start working with it and start breaking through it.
And life being what it is, it'll constantly throw things at us to make that happen, because if life is okay, we don't have to, because that's an uncomfortable experience to go through and figure out what those beliefs are. It can be uncomfortable.
It can be.
And if we don't need
But
to.
it's uncomfortable because the negative belief is making it seem uncomfortable. It's not inherently uncomfortable.
Sure.
That's what Bashar is trying to get us to understand. Is see, even that, there's layers to that, and saying, well, it's uncomfortable to go through that. It's not a fact. It's a belief.
That was a story I just told.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about telling yourself a different story, knowing that the new story you're telling that you prefer to tell is just as real and just as solid as any of the negative stories. But like you said, so much of it is unconscious that when we say things like, well, okay, I can do that, but it's going to be difficult or it's going to be uncomfortable. We have that extra layer that reinforces the idea that this is going to be difficult to let go of. You have to see that as another layer of the negative belief, and that it's not actually some kind of fact that's woven into the fabric of how we could experience things.
It's like it would help to have a buddy in life, someone that you have an agreement with. Hey, when you hear me telling these stories, these disempowering stories, call me on it right away.
Exactly. And Bashar is attempting to get us to call ourselves on it.
Sure.
So he's saying, listen to what comes out of your mouth, listen to what goes through your head, and don't just accept it as a fact.
Right.
Because from Bashar's perspective, there are very few facts in existence. Almost everything else we're dealing with is some kind of an opinion or a perspective or a belief. And those can be changed.
Sure. It'll be a different world when people say, you know what, that thing I just said over the last 20 seconds, scratch that. I'm never going to say that again. It's disempowering to everyone who hears it.
Right. Especially yourself.
Exactly. You've said that telepathy is possible when people have true empathy for the other person, which Bashar coined as telepathy.
Right.
That means only people being loving and compassionate can know another's thoughts, which also means probably the bad guy won't be able to.
It's possible. However, the thing of it is, more accurately, is that if you're simply on the same wavelength, you can know what someone else is thinking because you're having the same thoughts at the same time, because you're on the same frequency.
Because you have compassion for them.
Because you're willing to match the frequency.
Oh.
That can be a form of compassion, but there can also be negative association in that, because everything can do double duty.
Okay.
So as long as you're willing to identify with someone, whether they're positive or negative, is that a form of compassion? Maybe.
I see.
But the real physics of it is that you're matching a frequency, be it upper, lower, higher, lower, negative, positive, and it's in matching the frequency of someone else, being on the same wavelength, that you have similar thoughts. And so telepathy is not actually reading someone else's mind, it's reading your own mind.
Which is,
when you're on the same wavelength with someone else, you will have the same thought at the same time because you're on the same station. So you're receiving the same input.
Gotcha.
That's what telepathy is.
Nice. Okay. You've had conversations with Bashar all night long in your dreams at times.
A few times. Yeah.
A few times. Were you interviewing him?
In one case, yes, I was. And sometimes I'll ask questions, and sometimes he'll just show me things.
Do you ever ask sort of mundane questions like, how can I resolve this issue with my significant other? Should I buy this broccoli?
No.
Okay.
And especially not at this point. I understand enough of what he's saying to resolve those kinds of things myself, if they even come up anymore.
That's good to hear.
So, and you do experience less and less of those things when you understand those concepts clearly, because you're making choices that simply don't result in those kinds of things.
Sure.
But, there have been moments, like originally, long time ago, I was very curious because I am interested in science. And I was very curious, well, how do your spaceships work? How do you get from star to star? Now, the information is always delivered instantaneously. Everything is there in one moment, the entire answer. But it took me 3 hours to write all that out.
Sure.
So this is kind of what's happening in the channeling, is when someone asks a question, the entire answer is there.
In the question?
The entire answer is there when he sends it.
Gotcha.
And yet, because I'm acting as a translation device for that thought that comes in 1 second, it takes a while for my brain to unspool it in language.
Sure.
So Bashar is not, in a sense, answering someone in real time. He has completely given the entire answer.
Because he's busy. He's got other things to do.
No, not about that. It's just how information comes.
Right.
The illusion that he's having a real-time conversation is the result of the fact that my brain takes time to unspool the information.
Okay.
But that's why time for me in the channeling state is very collapsed. Because as far as I'm concerned, when someone asks a question, the entire answer is there. We're moving on.
Okay.
So I don't have to experience as much time because I'm in a different state where I know the answer's been given, I'm moving on. And I can actually have other conversations with him while he's talking to someone, because once the answer's there, it's only my brain that's unspooling it. He's no longer engaged until the entire translation has come out.
Now, because you're a filmmaker, I know you know this. Alfred Hitchcock has said the same thing about movies. Once he storyboarded it, he had it all done. He didn't want to make the movie after that. It was in his head already, it's done.
Yeah, in a sense. And this is really the whole essence of channeling. And one of the things I think is the most important for people to understand about channeling. It's a natural state we all get into. It's not something outside the realm of normal human
Everyone's
experience.
doing it all the time in different ways.
In different ways, especially when you're really involved in your passion, you're in the proper state. When we did the documentary First Contact, which is about how I became a channel and who Bashar is and what his messages are about, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things we did that I thought was one of the more important pieces of it is I did a channeling with my head wired to an EEG machine. We wanted to see what happens in the brain when you go into a channeling state. And there are some profoundly different things that happen. But the most important thing is we wanted to show that this is the same state, the gamma state between 40 and 100 hertz in the brain, 40 and 100 cycles per second, that happens to anyone who's following their passion, who's in the zone, who's in a deep meditation. We all do it when we're focused, we're not paying attention to the idea of time. We feel that it's been 5 minutes, it's been an hour, you're in the channeling state. So it's about what do you do with that state? And that was one of the most important things I think we did, was to demystify the idea that this is some arcane, unusual kind of thing. People are doing it all the time, whether they know it or not. It's really about paying attention to when you're in that state and deciding what it is you want to do when you're in that state.
So what's a step for that? What can people do now that they figure, maybe I'm a little more like Darryl than I thought I was, and I'm channeling, I'm a great cook, I'm a great gardener, I do this or that, and I'm in the zone. How can they translate that to other parts of their life to expand?
This is what comes down to what Bashar calls the formula. And again, it's part of the instruction manual. It's very simple. You act on your highest passion, whatever contains more excitement than anything else, even if it's a typical, ordinary thing.
Right.
Whatever has more excitement, even just the tiniest bit more excitement than any other option at that moment, you act on that first.
Yeah.
You act on it to the best you can till you can take it no further. Then you look for the next thing that contains more excitement or more passion than anything else, and you act on that next, in that order, and you keep going. And you do it with absolutely zero assumption, zero insistence on what the outcome should look like.
Yeah.
And there's a very specific reason for that. And I'll get back to that. And the final thing is, no matter what manifests from the actions you take, you remain in a positive state so that you can get the benefit from it, even if it's something that is something you don't objectively prefer. If you remain in a positive state, you can use what you don't prefer in a way that you do prefer and get a positive and beneficial result from that.
Sure.
The important thing about going back to, you have to drop all insistence on what the outcome should look like.
Yep.
One of the most important parts of that formula is because we all think we know what the outcome should look like that's best. We have no clue what the best outcome actually should be. Sometimes our imagination will coincide with what manifests, but many times it won't. And when it doesn't, if we're trained to think that if it's something that should look like what we thought it should look like,
then we failed.
We failed. And that's not the way to stay in the positive state.
Right.
You have to understand that whatever is happening for a reason.
And
the
in your
way it
highest and
looks,
best good?
to the highest and best good. That's remaining in the positive state. If you don't stay in that state, you can only experience a negative result. This again is just physics. What you put out is what you get back.
And you've given the example of if Bashar has, if you're being told you want to go to the beach, and it's just the most exciting thing you can do for yourself right now. It may not be your feet, your toes in the sand that's the result that the universe wants to give you. It may be somebody you meet along the way.
Exactly. It could be anything, and might even be not winding up at the beach.
Sure.
Because one of the things we kind of get tripped up about is the form the excitement comes in does not have to be what comes to fruition. This is why it's so important to let go of that insistence, because you don't know why it came to you in that form. It might be because your belief systems are such that if it came in any other way, you wouldn't act.
Right.
But it came in that way, and so, oh yeah, I'm excited about, I'll do that. And then suddenly it fades and you go, what happened? And it's like, well, the only reason it came in that way is because that's the only way you would get off your butt.
Right.
And now you're where you need to be so that what can happen, that needs to happen, can happen. And so that's why you have to just be really open to the idea of the flow of the way things manifest and come to you. Because it will come to you through synchronicity in the way that it needs to. Again, sometimes even appearing as things you don't prefer. But there's got to be a reason for that. And if nothing else, the simplest possible reason for that happening is you get a chance to see what you don't prefer, which by comparison makes it clearer what you do prefer. And that's a positive way to use what you don't prefer. Clarity about what you do prefer by contrast.
By contrast.
Right. And when you use it that way, it usually vanishes because you've used it up for the reason it's there. Otherwise, when you say, no, this doesn't belong in my life, that's wrong, this shouldn't have happened, you're invalidating something that is there for a reason. And it's like having a series of stepping stones, and suddenly you say, that stepping stone doesn't belong there, get rid of it, that's wrong. Well, now you have removed the stepping stone you need to get to the next stone.
Right.
So you're just stuck on this one because you can't make the gap.
Right.
So every stone that appears is a stepping stone that leads to where is best for you if you know how to use it positively. So that's what he's basically saying. It's not so much about what happens, it's about what you do with what happens that matters.
Right.
Because anything can serve double duty. This, again, reality is a fiction, in a sense. It's a projection.
Sure.
We only have so many symbols. We only have so many props that we can use. So they all have to be able to be used positively or negatively. So we get to decide, okay, I know how people say this looks. I know that in the past I might have said this is negative, but I'm not going to say that anymore. I'm going to put a positive meaning to why that's there. And I may not intellectually understand why right now, but I'm going to know that it's there for a reason. And I'm going to use my imagination to come up with an idea as to why it could have happened that way. And therefore, I'm going to get and extract a benefit from it. And that's what's going to allow me to use that stepping stone to get to the next one. Because I'm not invalidating any part of my reality.
And how boring would life be if we knew everything that was coming?
Yeah, exactly. There'd be no point. Because this is all about discovering new things, new perspectives about ourselves from a new point of view. Right. That's why we're having this physical experience. It's like we've kind of like forgotten who we are so that we can remember who we are, but from a new perspective. And that's how things grow. See, according to Bashar, the structure of existence never changes. What changes, what expands creation, is our perspective and our experience of that structure. So when we constantly see that structure that never changes from all these different points of view and all these different experiences, then creation is expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding through the experiences, through the perspective, but the structure is the same structure that's always been there.
Twin flames. Sacred union. These phrases have been around. Sacred union is one of the newer ones. Is it, do these relationships have more dimensionality to them than, say, falling in love in the traditional sense? Or what's
Not necessarily. It depends. These things are done by agreements, by arrangements. Some of them can happen that way. I don't think that all of them can happen or need to happen that way. From Bashar's perspective, anyone that you're interacting with at any given moment that's teaching you anything about yourself to become more of who you are at that moment is your soulmate, is your twin flame at that moment. The most important person that needs to be in your life at that moment. Because whatever's happening in the moment is the most important thing that should be happening in your life. So the idea is, yes, you can have those specific arrangements with other spirits, other souls. Okay, I'm going to meet you, blah, 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 in my 30th year, and, boo, 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 we'll fall in love, and bang. Sure, that can happen. Those kinds of arrangements can happen. But more often than not, I think people do themselves a disservice by assuming that it has to happen that way. Because then they're kind of like not really looking at other people who come into their lives who could be just as important and teach them the lesson that they need at that moment by thinking, well, you're not my soulmate, you're not my twin flame, so I don't have to really pay attention. So I think it's yes, with a caveat that look at everyone that comes into your life, because not every soulmate has to be a romantic relationship or anything like that. Even sometimes someone you might even consider an enemy could be teaching you the greatest lesson in your life.
True.
So it needs a broader definition about what that kind of thing means, while not canceling out the possibility that, yes, some souls do make that kind of arrangement with members of their own family, soul family.
Because I've been watching some videos of you and some of the interviews you've had, and been watching Bashar, but you specifically, I suspect, are a genius.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I'm not saying that as a prideful. I mean, literally, you've probably taken the tests. I imagine at some point in your life.
No.
Never.
No.
Okay. Okay.
I understand metaphysics very clearly because of what I've learned from Bashar mostly, and again because it's come through me, it's rubbed off to the point where I do just get it, and I sometimes actually have difficulty understanding why people don't get it because it seems so obvious to me. I don't necessarily want to call that genius. It's just I'm focused in that way.
Okay, maybe. And the reason I say I was watching one where the host was reading a question from someone when they mentioned a Merkaba. And the host didn't know what a Merkaba was. And then you pulled this definition out of your head that was amazing, on point, beautiful.
Well, I do a lot of reading.
Okay.
I do a lot of reading, and partly I do a lot of reading because it's one of the things that allows me to have the vocabulary that Bashar needs to get his points across.
Not just vocabulary. I've seen you work with people. Nothing throws you off your game. You're even as Darryl.
Now,
Yeah.
sure, I'm used to this a little bit more, but also remember that I probably picked up a lot of that information from him.
Sure.
So I'll know what to say about things like a Merkaba.
And how do you pick up things from him? Because you don't hear what he's saying.
I don't hear it, but
you
the
go back.
concept rubs off into
Okay.
me in my way, the way I need it.
Ah.
But it does, I don't hear the word. It's like when somebody walks into the room, if you're deep in a daydream and somebody has to call your name 3 times before you hear them,
Yes.
it's like that.
Okay.
I don't need to hear the translation for you. I'm getting what I need as a concept that's even in some ways more solid than what you may be hearing in the words. I kind of sometimes use the analogy, it's like I'm standing under a pounding waterfall. You're getting the spray. Why would I need to pay attention to the spray?
Sure.
This is so much more engaging, so much more immersive, and I get what I need. Now, sometimes if it's a new concept I haven't heard before, sometimes people will mention that Bashar said this about that.
Right.
And then I might go, okay, that's interesting. Let me kind of look deeper into that and I'll see what he said about it. Or I'll try to remember the images that I had at that moment that I'm associating with that concept. Because when I come out of it, it sort of fades like a dream. And I only retain, again, the idea of a concept. But because all the basic concepts are so simple, even things like the description of a Merkaba can actually come down to understanding, well, if the structure of existence is this, then the Merkaba has to be this, because it fits the concept of the structure of existence in this way. So it all comes down to that framework and everything measured against that framework so that you know what is the wheat and what is the chaff.
Can you explain what a Merkaba is?
A Merkaba, from my understanding, is a multidimensional expression, although in our dimension, mostly an expression of 2 tetrahedrons, one facing up, one facing down, that are interpenetrating. This represents the idea of as above, so below. It represents the intersection of different dimensions. It represents the intersection of consciousness, both higher mind, non-physical, and physical consciousness. It represents many different kinds of things. It represents an understanding that everything is connected. It represents an understanding that energy is active and present and expressing itself in our reality and also on another level simultaneously. It's many different things.
Nice. That was great, wasn't it? Okay. Do psychologists weigh in on your work? I mean, the advice seems very sound, and I mean, are they saying yes, that has sound psychological basis?
Well, the ones that have spoken to me have said so. Now, of course, who knows? You know, the ones that don't speak may have a completely different opinion.
Right.
I don't know. There have been very, very few over the course of 37 years. There have been very few people that have actually expressed something negatively to me in that context.
Sure.
When someone is open enough to just sort of listen to what Bashar is saying, no matter what discipline they're in, they seem to be able to get it, and they seem to be able to figure out how it works with what they know.
Sure.
Bashar has had conversations with psychologists. Bashar has had conversations with physicists. They come away very happy with the conversations that they've had with him, and he's explained principles to them from his point of view that seem to help them move some of their theories along.
Yeah.
So all I can say is, you know.
I have to go back and listen to the one Bashar did on time travel. That was amazing. It was last year at Conscious Life Expo. How many people in non-spiritual fields, like or times, have, let's say, government come knocking and maybe ask for a debriefing or
Never
not
that
ask?
I am aware of.
Ah,
Not that I'm aware of.
okay,
There may be people in the audience who don't introduce themselves.
sure.
No one has ever blatantly come to me and said, hey, I'm from the government and blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So not that I'm aware of.
Well, and you put there's a lot of free information out there on you on YouTube,
Mhm.
a lot of good interviews, a lot of good clips, Facebook
Yes.
groups and everything, and then at Bashar.org, and you have a lot of other things you
Sure.
offer as well. Would you say everyone is spiritual to some degree?
Everyone is a spirit. Now, whether they think of it that way, probably not all the time.
Right.
But everyone is a spirit. In fact, again, as Bashar has sort of said, spirit is our natural state. We don't ever actually leave it. We're there right now. We are pretending that we're not there. We are dreaming that we're not there. That's what physical reality is. So even if someone has no knowledge of what a spiritual path may be, and they don't have to have that terminology, somebody may be living a very honest, authentic spiritual life in whatever it is they're doing.
Right.
And some people obviously are having all sorts of negative beliefs that allow them to experience difficulty or suffering or pain. From the spirit point of view, that's still a spiritual path because they're going to learn something from it.
Sure.
Not that they have to do that. One of the things to learn is to learn that you don't have to do that, perhaps. That's what the age of transformation is all about, is starting to transform darkness into light, negative into positive, negative limitation into freedom. But everyone is a spirit, so every path they walk, in a sense, whether they know it or not, is a spiritual path. And at some point, the spirit will be able to use that to its advantage in a positive way.
What do you think of plant medicine? Is it helpful?
It can be, I think. I'm going to lump that to some degree in with a lot of other things that Bashar calls permission slips, which basically means that every tool, every technique, every ritual, every object in physical reality, in some way, shape, or form, is something that aligns with our belief system that we're attracted to, that allows us to give ourselves permission to let go of those beliefs and move up the scale of what our beliefs are all about. So it's valid in the sense that our belief system says this will work for us, this will open something up for us. And I'm not denying that there aren't physiological effects to things, but remember, we're creating physical reality with our consciousness.
Sure.
So in that sense, everything is simply something that we have said, this is a symbol that works with my belief system to allow me to give myself permission to become more of who I am. And that's why permission slips will work for some people and not for others, because it may not fit their belief system. But everything, tool, technique, ritual, or object, is another form of a permission slip that can allow us, if we're attracted to it, to circumvent some of the beliefs that may be holding us back. But we're still making the changes. So Bashar is basically saying the ultimate permission slip is just realizing that you're the one changing anyway. So if you just decide to change, just change. You don't really need another permission slip to do that. Just give yourself permission. He does. And again, of course, he specifically does, and in general, he considers his entire civilization to be part of his family.
Sure.
April, who runs Bashar Communications, as Bashar is my future self, her future self is his daughter.
Oh.
So we know that much. I know there's more to it, but he reveals what he reveals when he reveals it for a reason.
Sure.
So I can sense there's more things there, but I can also sense it's not time to know those things.
Gotcha.
So that might be one of those things that kind of prevents me from saying, oh, let me see what other burning questions I can ask, because I can just also sometimes sense it's not time to know that.
Got it.
So I'll tell you when it's time.
You've said before, Bashar said before, that other channels are bringing the same information through, so different audiences can hear them in ways that are comfortable to them.
Right.
Does Bashar bring any unique concepts through that they don't?
Well, like I said earlier, I think one of the unique things he brings is the idea of the rendition of all of these metaphysical concepts we've heard about for years and years and years and thousands of years, down to an actual pragmatic, practical, physical toolkit. This is how reality works. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Just do this. You'll get a physical result. Before Bashar started coming through, I never heard anyone else explain metaphysical concepts in such a grounded way.
Sure.
In such a way that actually involves the physics of it. Here's why it works. It's like you hear, like everyone has said for so long, follow your bliss, act on your dreams,
Right.
act on your passion. But why? Why does that work? Before Bashar came through, personally, I never heard anyone say why that works in our physical reality.
Right.
So because he himself has physicality, he is still a physical being. He understands we need the physical tool. So I like the idea that he's been able to take all of these metaphysical concepts and translate them into a practical physical toolkit. Do X, get Y.
Right.
This is why it works. This is how it works. Here's the mechanism behind it. So that we don't just have the idea of, well, I have to just have the faith that it works. That's fine. But the physical mind gets a chance to understand why it works. And now you have a complete understanding.
Yes. Has anything come through in the last year or two that just surprised you? Like it was a true up-leveling of information?
I will immediately say yes, because I know that's happened, but whether I can recall exactly which one of those things it is, I may need to think about that for a moment, because so much comes through, and after I come out of it, it's kind of a blur.
Sure.
But I know he constantly delivers very new things that sometimes are very surprising. Astonishing, just from my perspective, having been immersed in this for so long, it's just always astonishing to me that it seems challenging for people to understand how simple this is. And I think
unlearning all those things.
And I think the question that Bashar ultimately gets quite often in private sessions, or sometimes in public, more often in private sessions, is it really truly this simple? And he will really go into depth about, yes, it really is. There's no such thing as an inherently difficult situation. It's just your belief telling you that it is. It really is that simple, because existence has to be based on simple principles. It may be richly complex in how it combines those principles, but just like making a tapestry, you have a red thread, you have a blue thread, you have a green thread. The structure, the underlying structure, is very simple. You can weave all sorts of patterns out of it. But it has to be simple, otherwise it would be, in a sense, too heavy to support itself if it was really complicated. So the principles are very simple. And once you understand the principles, it's so much easier to answer all your own questions. It's so much easier to experience a life that is in alignment with your joy. It's just the understanding of this is how it works. And if they can really wrap their minds around that, then comes that wonderful aha moment when you see the light in their eyes and they actually click and they get it. And then you have people coming back and going, oh my God, I finally got it. I finally applied it in the way that he was talking about. I got that belief out of the way, and boy, did it work. And it's just like, that is the best part of doing this channeling, is when people get it and you can see the change within them. And it's just like they can breathe for the first time in their life. And it's so rewarding.
So people can book private sessions with you through your website?
They can.
At bashar.org?
Yes.
Okay. This has been great.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for creating another opportunity for this information to be shared with more people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Scott Ware with Radiance Magazine and Darryl Anka, who channels Bashar, will be at the Conscious Life Expo in February of 2020, and other places that they can find on your website.
Yes.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.